The world they had entered was silent, too silent. Snowflakes drifted gently from a sky blanketed in pale gray, their descent unhurried like time itself had slowed. The ground was thick with fresh snow, untouched by footsteps or signs of life. A frostbitten forest surrounded them, tall pines stretching into the haze, their branches heavy with white. Everything was still, almost serene. But the calm pressed on their ears like weight, oppressive, suffocating. One of the hunters kicked at the snow, grumbling beneath his breath. This doesn't even feel like a dungeon. Where's the mana distortion? Where's the gate? His breath fogged in the air as he looked around, nothing but white and wood. Jin-Woo stood a few steps apart from the group, his dark silhouette a sharp contrast against the pristine backdrop. His sharp gaze swept the landscape, catching every motionless tree, every whisper of falling snow. There's no sense of danger, he thought. No monsters, no movement. No auras. Han-sung I shivered behind him, more from unease than cold. Is it normal for a dungeon to look like this? She asked hesitantly. No, Jin-Woo replied quietly. This isn't normal at all. The calm of the white forest shatters in an instant. A sharp whoosh slices through the air. A flash of blue blurs toward the girl. Han-sung I only barely turns in time, eyes widening. But before the arrow can strike her, Jin-Woo's hand snaps up, intercepting it mid-flight. The impact makes his arm jolt slightly, but his grip remains steady. The arrow hums with cold magic, its tip shimmering faintly with frost. A second later, a scream erupts behind them. One of the hunters staggers back, clutching his face as something corrosive and freezing splashes across his eyes. Steam rises where it touches skin. He howls, stumbling and falling in the snow, clawing at his own face. The others whirl around, weapons half-raised, shouts overlapping in confusion, until one of them squints into the dense forest canopy and goes pale. They're in the trees. He yells, pointing. In the dusky shadows of the snow-laden branches, shapes move. Dozens of eyes glowing with that distinct cold blue peer down silently. Their pupils are slits, their gazes unblinking. From the darkness, thin figures creep forward across the limbs of trees, blending with the snow and bark. Then a chorus of high-pitched shrieks fills the forest, too loud, too sharp, it pierces bone. Ice elves. Jin-Woo narrows his eyes, his stance shifting. I didn't even sense them. Their presence was masked, not just by distance but something else. A technique, a trait. The others begin to murmur. Ice elves? No, they're not like the ones in the reports. They're not elves, not anymore. Among seasoned hunters, a different term passes from mouth to mouth. Not ice elves, but frost reapers, not creatures of myth and grace, but silent predators of the frozen realms, hunters who stalk other hunters, whose beauty only masks their cruelty. They don't toy, they don't show mercy. They kill in silence, without emotion, and they never come alone. And now they have surrounded the party. Someone's hand fumbled in vain to press against the red essence, but it was no use. The gate had sealed completely shut. The red-haired man remarked, clearly unsettled, that this was strange enough considering it was supposed to be a C-rank gate. The assistant standing nearby confirmed the classification. The man then asked whether the Korean Hunters Guild had been contacted, to which the assistant replied that they didn't seem particularly willing to get involved. The red-haired man's expression darkened instantly. Red gates, after all, typically appeared only in high-ranking dungeons. He was furious that the Korean Guild refused to help, thinking it must be a mistake. Perhaps the gate levels varied in ways they couldn't predict. The assistant wondered whether they should try measuring it with a magic gauge, but the man dismissed the idea as completely pointless in the current circumstances. He demanded to know how many personnel had gone inside, and the chief replied that 12 people had entered, listing out the high-ranking hunters among them. The red-haired man began to mentally calculate: 1 A rank, 7 B ranks, and others, likely new recruits. The assistant voiced concern about whether those recruits would survive, and the man replied that this gate was likely either A or B rank, theorizing all possible factors that could affect its difficulty. He stated gravely that if the gate was indeed A rank, they would have to prepare for the worst and consider the hunters already dead. If they were lucky, maybe a few would return alive. The chief hesitated, then nervously mentioned that 2 individuals inside the gate weren't affiliated with their guild. The tension heightened as the red-haired man sharply asked who they were. The chief responded that one of them was a hunter who had recently caught his attention. The red-haired man's gaze flared with immediate rage as he guessed whether it was the same hunter Chief On had taken a liking to. Covering his face with a hand, the chief confirmed it. When asked the rank of this hunter, whether A or B, the chief merely shook his head, indicating no. The man's voice turned sarcastic as he guessed S rank, but again the answer was no. The chief finally admitted that the hunter had an E rank, and the red-haired man was struck by the gravity of the situation, realizing now with utter seriousness that this was no joke. This was a disaster in the making. One of the men stood frozen in place, his mouth agape in mute horror, his eyes obscured by some kind of white liquid, evidence that he had been dispatched in the same brutal manner as the others. The boy recalled the characteristics of these elves, their sharp eyes, their heightened attentiveness, and the fact that they had efficiently hunted down the weakest member of the group first. He thought to himself that had this occurred just a few months prior, the arrow would likely have struck him instead. As the elves scoped out their next victim, a shift came over the boy's expression. It turned maddened and fierce. He snapped the arrow he had just caught with his bare hand and gazed forward with grim resolve. Silently, he vowed to kill them with his own hands. At that moment, another voice joined the tense silence, remarking sarcastically that the elves were surprisingly welcoming. This new recruit, recognizing the severity of the situation, stated that the danger of the Red Gate meant they wouldn't be able to escape unless they cleared the dungeon. The surrounding group cried out in alarm upon hearing it confirmed as a Red Gate. The girl, unfamiliar with what that meant, asked Jin-Woo for clarification. The boy calmly explained that the gate was a connection to another world, and once inside there was no leaving until the dungeon was completed. He further clarified that, put simply, they were trapped and in deep trouble. His explanation sent a wave of shock through the others.